We're now live there. Apologies.
Why have we got an echo?
We're now live.
Thank you. Good morning, members, officers and members of the public who may be viewing the live stream of this meeting. Welcome to this September meeting of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. My name is Councillor Peter Sanford. I am normally the Vice Chair of this committee, but will be chairing the committee today as the regular Chair, Councillor Michael Atkins, has given his apologies. Most of you are probably aware that Michael is on paternity leave following the arrival of his daughter, Lucy Elizabeth, 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure we all join in sending best wishes to all three of the Atkins family. I have a few housekeeping announcements before we get into the agenda. Please can those in the council chamber note that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, is likely to be broadcast at some point. The camera follows the microphone being switched on, so councillors and officers are advised to wait a couple of seconds before speaking to allow the camera to catch up. Please can those participating in the meeting via the live stream note you should indicate that you wish to speak via the chat column. Please do not use the chat column for any other purpose. Make sure that your device is fully charged and that you switch your microphone off unless you have been invited to do otherwise. Please ensure that you have switched off or silenced any other devices you have so they do not interrupt proceedings. Please use a headset when speaking and hold the microphone close to your mouth. When you are invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone is switched on. When you finish addressing the meeting, please turn your microphone off immediately. Speak slowly and clearly, and please do not talk over or interrupt anyone. That concludes the housekeeping announcements. We now move on to apologies for absence. Democratic Services, do we have any apologies for absence today, please?
Chair, aside from Councillor Michael Atkins, I'm not aware of any others. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dobson. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. I have to ask for clarification at this point. If we've already declared an interest in a previous meeting, do we need to repeat the declaration at this meeting? Rory?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Chair, as this is a new meeting, even though it is potentially the same interest, I would declare it, yes.
Thank you. In which case I have to declare that I am a non-remunerated Director of Ermine Street Housing, trading as South Cans Limited. Does anyone else have any declarations of interest? Councillor Stovard.
Yeah, my interest is as the Council's board member for the South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership.
Noted, thank you. Any other declarations from around the room? Okay, thank you. Okay, now we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Before we ask for approval, Peter Maddock, I think you have a comment on one of the items in the minutes. Or you can defer to the, I think the last agenda item was, that is a topic of interest.
Yeah, so, which item was it?
Regarding the external,
so I mean, the item, are you referring to the item under any other business?
yeah.
Yeah, so there's a report on the agenda about where we are with the fees for 18-19. So shall I pick everything up under that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think the minutes noted that the report will be brought back to the committee today, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so that the report that's there, because the usual process for settling fees rests with the public public sector audit appointments, they now have the information from us and indeed from EY, and they will be carrying out a review of those fees, and that's the proper route for settling issues like this. So I'll talk about it in a bit more detail when we get to the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. In which case, are members happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July 2022 as a correct record? If so, I move approval of the minutes. I'll need a seconder, I think.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Anyone have any objections to approval of the minutes? Okay, we'll consider them approved. I would make one comment regarding the last meeting. A leader of the council became aware of a number of comments that were made during discussions and expressed her concern to Councillor Michael Atkins as chair. I fully appreciate there's a lot of history around the council finances and particularly the audits, but please try and keep your comments respectful and professional, however tempting it may be not to. Thank you. We did have a request for public speaking from a Mr. Oh, sorry, Heather. Go ahead, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think if the leader has an issue with anything that any members of this council have said, then it would be helpful to identify what it was. I'd also say, Chair, that I would seek your reassurance and that this is not a political, this is a scrutiny function of which the leader does not have authority to say how this matter is conducted. Can I seek your assurance that there will not be political interference and we will continue to be able to fulfil our scrutiny role?
Noted. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, we are here to perform a scrutiny role and resolve all the problems outstanding with the account. So this isn't a particular issue. I heard about this second-hand via Councillor Atkins, so I don't know the details, but I could certainly follow up when Councillor Smith is back from her holiday. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I need to declare an interest. That must be you, Councillor Hales.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I omitted to declare this when you asked for the declarations. I didn't think it was relevant, but it apparently is. So I declare as an interest as a trustee of the Melbourne Mobile Warden Scheme, which has received and is receiving grants from SCDC. Thanks.
Thank you. We did receive a request for public speaking from Mr. Daniel Fulton. Mr. Fulton is not in the room. I do not see him on the live stream, so I think we can move on to the next agenda item. Members, we have now reached agenda item 4, an update on the use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, known by the acronym RIPA. Can I ask Mr. Rory McKenna, Monitoring Officer, to present this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair, this is an item that normally comes at the end of the agenda, but it was decided at the last meeting to bring it forward simply because it's a very short item. I can confirm that RIPA was not used since the committee last met. I have no further update, but I'm happy to take questions, and it is just a noting report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Do any members of the committee have questions or comments? I see no one wishing to speak, so I will say thank you to Rory McKenna for his report. The committee is asked to note that the council has not used surveillance powers since the committee last met. Item 5 on the agenda is Treasury Management Annual Report 2021-22. May I ask Peter Maddock, Head of Finance, to present this report?
Thank you. So this committee receives reports in relation to our Treasury management function. There's an annual report comes at this time of year, so that obviously looks at the year that ended on 31st of March. The next committee will see a half-yearly report, and there will also be a Treasury strategy. So this is the first of those sort of 3 reports. You'll see the first table shows a summary of our Treasury position. That's paragraph 5 on page 11. And you'll see that we've got 205 million with the Public Works Loan Board that relates to our housing self-financing. Those are longer term loans. And then we've got local authority borrowings of 50 million at the end of March. And you'll see we also had investments of 117 million. So the net position, or the net borrowing position, was 137 million. The second table shows a bit more detail behind the 117 million. So that's at paragraph 6. So you'll see that there's lending with a number of banks and building societies, money market funds. But primarily our lending is to South Cambs Limited, Ermine Street, and there was 95 million lent to them at the end of March. And there's been a slight increase in investments over the 12-month period of about 6 million. You'll see that there at the bottom of that table. There's a further table at paragraph 14 which just shows some of the counterparties that we have money with and the maturity dates of those. And there's just another table showing the borrowing position in summary. So that's just again the PWLB and shorter term borrowing. We do regular benchmarking exercises with other local authorities, looking at returns, looking at credit risk, and obviously from authority to authority there are sort of different credit risks and different returns. So we put the average in, and at the moment our returns are a bit better than average, but also our risk is a little bit higher than average. But certainly it's within tolerances that we set, so there's nothing particularly of concern there. I think that's probably all to say on that at this point. There's at Appendix B, there's some information from our Treasury advisors. They provide an economic review. Now, this is obviously related to the last financial year, and things have moved on quite a bit since then, but that's there just for anybody has any thoughts, comments, or questions on the report.
Taking chair's privilege, I have a question about the table at the bottom of page 13. Most of the investments listed appear to have matured already. They've been rolled over, reinvested? Or?
Yeah, so those investments. Yeah, so that's just showing us what's happened since that. So obviously the year end we had those investments and some of those have matured and they generally would have been rolled over. The mid-year report will be able to give us an update on that. I don't know the exact position, but that'll be able to give us an update on where we are with those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just have some elaboration around the amount of funds that we have on short-term loans. We've discussed this in the past, and what are our thoughts on how we're going to either refinance or pay back. I asked the question, Chair, in reference to the statement on page 17 about the indicators around needing to be replaced at times of uncertainty over interest rates. Just wondering how we're going to deal with that. Thank you.
So we are now thinking about mixing our borrowing up a bit more. So we've taken advantage of low interest rates in the past, but obviously now, as we know, interest rates are starting to go up. We're looking to invest some longer term. We're going to be talking to our advisors about how long term that is, because one thing we don't want to do, we don't want to take out very long term investments, very long term borrowing if we find that the borrowing that about supporting the asset is sold, for example. So we're going to be looking potentially at having some of our borrowing long term, but I would suspect it would be a mixture of both. It would probably be where we would go at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just remind me, or Mr Maddox or myself, how much it is that we're going to need to refinance this year?
So we're still at 50 million. We've got some due for refinancing in December. Now we're starting to look at what we do with that. I think from memory we've got 5 million. We've got 2 tranches of 5 million coming up. So what we will probably do is roll one over shorter term and go one longer term. We need to talk to our Treasury advisors about what the best period is to go for with that. Obviously, interest rates are very volatile at the moment, and you know we're obviously seeing increases. So, are those increases going to be longer term or sustained? Are they not? So, there's quite a few things in the mix to assess what's the best course of action. And I think I'd be reluctant to do anything of a knee-jerk reaction without talking this through with our Treasury advisors, just to make sure that we get the strategy right.
Chair, if I may, just taking on board the comments made by Mr Maddox there, that and given obviously the current climate, that when those decisions are made, that we could have sight of that at a report on it at the future meeting, because I'm just conscious that even the long-term loans will expire at some point. So if we could have a clear strategy presented to Audit, I think that would be good for a governance point of view.
I think that's a very good suggestion, Councillor Williams. Mr Maddox, is that feasible?
Yeah, so we obviously update our Treasury strategy, and I think there will be some changes. You know, we've had a couple of years of fairly sort of benign rates, but now we need to look at that. And I suspect the Treasury strategy going forward will need to be amended to take into account the situation we're facing at the moment. Yeah, so that's probably the best time to put it in as part of that report, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr Maddox. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose on the other side of the coin, we seem to be looking at a period in which inflation is increasing, which would tend to erode the value of our investments, I suppose, unless the returns tend to increase commensurately. And I just, I'm sorry, I should have prepared this question, but it only really occurred to me just listening to what Councillor Williams was saying. I mean, for the investments that we have, how much, to what extent are we sort of locked into a sort of percentage return that was, more associated with the previous 10 years than the next 10 years, if you like, and have we got enough wriggle room to sort of unwind that position and readjust?
So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our investments are in Ermine Street, so we're getting a good return on that, and that is tied up for the longer term. You know, the latest business plan from Ermine Street was suggesting that they wouldn't be able to repay that loan for some time. So a lot of our investments are tied up with Ermine Street longer term. Most of the rest of them are fairly short term. I think without going through them, I think there's some of them are sort of up to 6 months. We've got a few a bit longer than that. So, and we do hold some money quite short, but of course the rates on that is obviously not that good. So we'll be looking at that. We've got quite a bit of flexibility, but obviously if we need to make investments, we may well see an increase in rates. But then on the reverse of that is an increase in borrowing rates. So it's quite things are quite volatile at the moment, as I said, and I think the other thing we are looking at, and this again is a bit of a balancing act, is whether we do invest for a slightly longer term. some of our investments, because we have traditionally gone quite short. But, you know, we are having a think about other investments we could make. There's some property fund investments out there, and I know we've sort of talked about that a little bit in the past. At the moment, we haven't done any more on that, but that might be something we might want to consider to increase our investment returns. But again, we've got to balance that against when we're going to need the cash. So again, that's something to talk through with our Treasury advisors. So we're in for some interesting times, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maddock. Are there any other comments or questions from the floor, members? Oh. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question of curiosity as much as anything. Why are we investing in, or how do we choose to invest in particular local authorities?
So what tends to happen is that if we've got some money that we need to invest, we have a broker who will he will know what authorities are looking for money, and he'll also know what authorities are looking to lend some money. So he's sort of like a matchmaker, if you like, to trying to. And we'll often find that say one authority wants 5 million, they will tell the broker what rate they're looking for, and we'll often find there's a little bit of competition around the rate. So, you know, generally, if we're wanting to go for a year, we'll find one authority that perhaps is prepared to offer a bit more. So it's nothing more than that. A broker sort of just tries to match the person that needs the money with the person that's lending it, and yeah, you know, we don't really know who it's going to be with until the day, I guess.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
This is another general question. We haven't referred, and I know it comes up for review in a later meeting, the risk register, the council's risk register. And I was wondering, you know, given what Councillor Williams and Councillor Harvey have said about how things emerge and change, I was wondering how investment risk appears on the risk register, and if it is there anything going from green to orange, or from orange to red? Just a kind of general comment as to how visible these things are at the level of the council's risk.
So we are actually currently doing quite a lot of work on our risks. I can't remember the last meeting or the meeting before, there was a report came about our risk register. So we're actually reviewing all of our risks, and clearly this is one which at the moment will need updating because quite a bit has happened in recent months. So we'll be looking, there is a risk around our borrowings and lendings, so we'll need to review that risk, and that will all be coming back fairly shortly. But we are actually doing quite a big exercise across the authority, looking at all of our risks. I think some of them are definitely in need of updating. There will probably be some new risks that we need to introduce as well. So there is quite a lot of work going on that. So you should see something fairly shortly around risks in relation to interest, borrowings, and general finance, because clearly, you know, we've got inflation going through the roof, we've got increases in interest rates, we've got prospects of reduced funding. So there's a lot of financial risk coming along, so we need to carefully look at our risks and update them in light of what's happening at the moment. So it's quite a lot to look at on the risk front at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from members? Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Chair. For Peter again. Sorry, Peter. It's to do with the risk, actually. Now that's been raised by Councillor Stobart. Risk. You talked about the work you're doing on it now, just to update it and what have you. Given the current climate, it looks like that could be for the next few years, perhaps. Will that risk be reviewed more frequently, do you think?
I think a lot of the financial risks at the moment are going to need to be reviewed more frequently. You know, it's just the sort of situation we find ourselves in. So, I mean, the risk register is reviewed pretty much quarterly by officers, so they will look to review the risks. But something like this, I think, yeah, quarterly at the very least, really. So, because you know, even in the last few weeks, so much has happened. So, and you know, there's nothing to stop us. You know, if there's something really significant happening, there's nothing to stop us having a look at the risk now, because you know, obviously, you need to review them in a timely fashion. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members? I do not see any hands raised, so thanks to Peter Maddock for his report. The committee is asked to approve the Treasury Management Annual Report. Does anyone wish to vote against approval or abstain? In which case I'll propose approval. Would someone like to second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Could members give me their verbal agreement to approve this report?
Great information.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The annual report is approved. We now move to agenda item 6, which is the report on the Council's whistleblowing policy. May I ask Jonathan Tully, Head of Internal Audit, to present this report. Mr. Tully.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning all. I hope you're well. So we have a revised whistleblowing policy. The purpose of whistleblowing policy is to provide a procedure for our employees, contractors, councillors, and also agency workers to be able to report any concerns they've got about wrongdoing, risk or malpractice in a safe way. We've got a whistleblowing framework in place, and what we've done, we've reviewed that to make sure that it continues to meet best practice standards. And as a result of that, we've updated the policy, which is what we're bringing to you today. The legislation for whistleblowing is the Public Interest Disclosure Act, and that hasn't changed in a number of years. But we also work with Protect, the national whistleblowing charity, and that gives us the opportunity as part of our framework review to basically just pick up best practice. And that's what's driven us to bring a revised policy to you today. So we're looking for the committee to review the policy and approve it. So the report starts on page 25, but hopefully with that introduction, that provides an overview of what the policy is all about. And so I'd probably bring your attention to page 26, which is the summary of changes made. So the policy's had a bit of a zero-based review, so we haven't brought one with track changes. So I've provided this table to basically help illustrate what's developed since the previous version. So we've reflected the latest terminology from Protect. So this is mostly about language and making the document easier to read. We need to have more effective communication, really, when we present this to people. So it needs to be easy to digest. So we're hoping it achieves that, and that it also provides some clarity around how concerns are handled when they're received, because that's also good data protection management, so people understand how their concern will be processed. In terms of accessibility, we've developed an online form which guides people through the process of basically making a referral. It can be a daunting time sometimes to speak up, and to help people provide the right information the first time, this form should help them do that. In terms of engagement, we're going to promote the revised policy amongst colleagues, and that will be lots of online articles at the council. But we're also conscious that some of our colleagues, we don't all work in front of computers each day. So to help make sure we have full engagement and reach out to other people, we're also going to develop some posters to display around the premises. So that should help with the engagement there. So I think briefly in conclusion, I think just worth recognising the policy. It forms part of our counter fraud and corruption work. That forms part of our overall governance arrangements. So it makes good sense for this committee to be involved with oversight of the policy and to help support it and approve it. So the policy is attached as an appendix, and I'm happy to take questions or comments that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Do any members have comments or questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. So, because this is something that we looked at as part of the anti-bullying task and finish group as well, so it went through quite a review then. And one of the things that we talked about was that there's no point in having a policy if it's stuck in a drawer and nobody knows. One thing we discussed was about sort of just doing a sort of check every year or so, a bit like we have to do planning and licensing training every 2 years. That documents like this, people would have to confirm that they had seen it and everything else. And I was wondering whether that had been pursued, because that was with the anti-bullying policy and everything else that was going with it. And when you say about posters, it's going to sound like a random request, but could we make sure that they are in private places, such as toilets? And that is because if you are, one of the things we were talking about when we were doing the anti-bullying and looking at the LGA Code of Conduct was there's no point in main reception having a poster about whistleblowing, because everyone will be too scared they'll be seen at it taking down the number. It sounds like a very simple thing, but actually it has a big impact on how effective it is. Turning to the document itself, on page 32, we have the steps to raise concerns. And quite rightly, there is a sentence on how to raise a concern relating to a councillor. What isn't particularly clear is what is for a councillor to raise concern about an officer. And I do think that that should be included so that we can make sure that we are raising things, if there are internal issues that we become aware of, that we can raise them in the appropriate manner, and we're not actually leaving somebody that perhaps is, experiencing difficulties, making life worse for them. So I did feel that that's something that is missing, and I hope Rory won't be too busy with complaints about us, Chair. But yes, if we could look at that. And also, I see we talk about people that are doing agency work and what have you, being able to access this as well. But equally, contractors, and how do you, if a third party, for example, was to visit this council and see something, they're only here for a few days, but they see something they're really uncomfortable with, how do they fit into this situation? Or is there something that we need to do to help third parties more? Because the point of this is quite often actually when you're in a situation and you're living it day in, day out, I think many councillors can empathise with this, you then start to sort of almost normalise it. And actually sometimes it takes somebody that's not normal, not in your normal day-to-day routine, that will identify things. Not suggesting, of course, Chair, that all this is going on, but we want a good policy to support our officers. Thank you, Chair.
I think I saw 4 points there, Mr. Tully. Did you note them all down?
I did, thanks, yes. So I suppose going through those in order, the first one was about getting employees to acknowledge that they've read the policy. I'm going to have to take that one away. I don't know what the local practice and protocol is, but I'm happy to feed back to the committee on that. The second point was around displaying the posters in sensible locations and private locations. Yeah, that's a brilliant suggestion. I totally agree with that. So thanks very much. We'll definitely take that into consideration. The third point was around just tweaking the text a little bit to make sure that if a councillor wants to raise a concern about an officer, so I'm happy to make that amendment. That's sensible. I don't think that's a big ask. And the fourth one was around third parties. Yeah, and I recognise that as a sensible point as well. With third parties, we also have the complaints process, which would probably normally be the correct route for them to raise concerns. But if they did raise a concern to me, I would obviously take that on board. I mean, whistleblowing is built around the Public Interest Disclosure Act, and the main function of that is to basically safeguard sort of internal colleagues who raise concerns. So it's really about helping them have the confidence to speak up and feel they're not going to, get in trouble for speaking up. They will be sort of protected, and we can't offer that sort of protection to third parties. But I've always got a sort of open door for hearing about concerns. And you probably see that what we do sort of talk about in the policy is that people don't always know the right route about how to report concerns. So we do have this sort of triage type approach where if it's more appropriate that it gets dealt with through a different policy or a different route, we will then pass that on and we'll inform the person who's raised the concern that's the best way for it to be handled. But the door's open for people to raise concerns. So hopefully that answers the sort of fourth point.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, no follow-up?
No, you'll be pleased to hear, Chair, no follow-up from me today.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I have a set of questions which kind of follow along from that. More about the individual who observes something going wrong and then has to go through a process a bit like, I suppose, going to see the doctor. I'm ill, I'm going to see the doctor. So that same kind of threshold has to be crossed. There is something wrong. I need to talk to somebody about it. So I wondered if there was, first of all, a kind of an informal approach that could be made. So I'm thinking, who are the people involved? Who would I approach? And I think in bullying and harassment policies, there is a group of independent, what I call wise heads, who are clearly, and there may be several in the organisation covering different areas, and that's important because they're recognised to be well away from the area that you're going to talk about. So first of all, an informal, am I going mad, or is this actually something that's going wrong kind of dialogue? But once it does actually begin, and once you cross that threshold, you really want to know what's going on. And I mean, for some people it might be quite straightforward, but for others, that's a worrying thing, is this career limiting? I think that's already addressed. I can think of situations in my past where I would have backed away from this because of threat to career. So there will be always that, and I think it's the time scales. So you will get a response within a week, and that's committed to, and that's very reassuring to the individual. And the person that they interact with, is that person recognised trustworthy? There was a person in an organisation who handled the case very wisely, and she was in a very different function. She had a reputation for independence and robustness, and people loved that. So I think that detachment, that assurance of detachment, and that assurance that this will happen in a timely way are very important to the success of the process, because that kind of gets into the culture that says it's okay. Now, of course, this should not happen in the council very often, but when it does, it should be handled in this excellent and timely and reassuring way.
So yeah, I agree. That's got to be absolutely our aspiration, to handle things in an excellent, timely way, and provide people with assurance that the process is robust. And I recognise your points about the detachment, and people then having the confidence to do that. I suppose what I would talk about. I mean, I'm in my role as head of internal audit. I am a very independent role. And the inquiries will come through to me in the first instance, so they should have confidence because of my role that it's coming through to a safe place. But I would also add, what we would hope to develop as a positive culture in the organisation in terms of speaking up, that people can go and speak immediately to their line manager if they have a concern. That's a very sensible route and a healthy route to progress. As a first course of action, really, and that's what we'd want, rather than have to go through the whole sort of whistleblowing process. But it's important that it's there should we need that.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart with a follow-up. Okay, thank you. In which case, I have Councillor Hales.
Thank you. Good morning, Jonathan. Jonathan, there's been some really brilliant suggestions, actually, and what have you this morning. Reference to Councillor Williams' regard to posters in private places and what have you. I just wonder if there's going to be any room on this poster to have the modern day equivalent of the QR code for instantly access a particular web page where it has every single link that you can think of that we should put up. And if you recall, we discussed a while back about the policy itself holding links to the if you like, the staff whistleblowing processes, because the two link across with each other. So if we have all of our whistleblowing policies linking with each other, so no one can be in any doubt they've got the right document and all of the help that they might be able to access. And on page 33, it's got independent advice, the heading, sorry, independent advice, external monitoring and oversight and data. But the one that was missing for me was internal. So it's not obvious, if you like. So I wonder if there's any merit in making it as blindingly obvious as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. So the QR codes is a good idea. I like that. I had not considered that. I will take that away. I don't think that should be too tricky. I can't say for sure. So I'll definitely look into that for the posters. It's a good idea. Yes, the policy. I think we've discussed this before, and I think that would be a good, sensible addition to link into other lots of policies that we have. There'll be HR policies and also counter fraud policies. And in this policy, we do highlight that there may be other routes which we might want to progress once a query comes in. It might be better dealt with under sort of grievance or bullying and harassment, for example. I think the nature of whistleblowing inquiries is such that you never know what's going to come in. So we wouldn't be able to list every single policy out there, but certainly, I think it's a good idea. There are going to be some key policies which would be very sensible to include. So we'll make reference to that on all the promotion. And the third point, can I just seek a little bit more clarification on that one, if it's okay? So this was around the independent advice. Was this on page 33? Was this the external contact section you were thinking about?
Yeah, you've got independent advice, external contacts, monitoring, oversight, and then data protection. I wondered if there was, you've got how we handle the matter and what have you in the 2 pages beforehand where it talks about internal, so to speak. I was just wondering if there was any merit. It doesn't have to be, but if there's any merit to just have the internal route, because sometimes people look for the obvious if they're worried or whatever. So they would go, how do I do that internally?
Yeah. Okay, I can see your point. I'm happy to take that one away and reflect upon that in terms of clarity. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the section about independent advice, and when I read through the policy, it took a long time before I found that bit about the independent advice. So I wondered whether it would be possible to move that ahead in the document, so that if someone was considering what to do, that they saw that quite early on, if that was something that might help them, if they were feeling anxious or vulnerable, if they saw something which was independent, that might give them, if they saw that early on in the document rather than reading, that might be the first thing that they wanted to do, rather than it being at the bottom of the policy, and also whether that could be included on the posters as another option.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely include that on the posters for sure, because the independent advice that we always refer to is the National Whistleblowing Charity Protect, and that's their role and function is to be there and help advise people about whistleblowing. So yeah, we'll definitely put that on the poster. I'll have a look at the text and see if we can do a signpost link to the other section of that policy lower below, so they can see about that. Yeah, I'll have a look at that.
Thank you. Councillor, you mean to join?
Thanks. Or perhaps just if the charity Protect has its graphic, you know, like a small imprint in the document or something that just makes it visible that this is an independent organisation and that they're outside and that this is their professional expertise. Perhaps just like a picture, an imprint with their logo might make it stick out more. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a chat to Protect about the use of a logo on there. I mean, this is based on their sort of model guidance for writing a policy, so I hope they will be supportive of that. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, sorry. Jonathan, just going back to the QR code, this might be a trip downstairs to the IT section for having a web page which is dedicated purely to this, but actually the QR code thought that was running through my head was that it will direct someone to a web page which may have the poster, all the icons for the whole lot on that one web page. So all of the information that person can just click quickly on a quick trip to the loo, boom, thank you very much, they get it, they go away, they can deal with it on their own quietly in private, which bears out Councillor Williams and Councillor Leeming's points. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any more comments or questions from members? Okay, the committee is asked to approve the whistleblowing policy. We've made quite a few requests for modifications, additions. Is anyone wishing to vote against the whistleblowing policy as it stands or want to abstain? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Williams.
I just think a lot of suggestions have been made and some alterations agreed to being made. So if I can just suggest that we have the recommendation that we approve it subject to the amendments that we've requested, as opposed to as it stands in the papers, Chair.
Excellent suggestion, Councillor Williams. Is everyone in agreement with that? Yeah. Okay. Yes. In which case, I will propose approval of the policy subject to the amendments discussed today. Could I have a seconder for that, please?
Looks like me again, or Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams, just for a change. Thank you. So that is approved subject to amendments. We can now move on to item 7 on the agenda, an update on governance, risk and control. May I ask Mr. Tully again to present this report?
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular item on the agenda. It's just a topical report on governance, risk and internal control, and it's just a highlight of things which have been happening over the last quarter. Hopefully it's easy to digest, but I'll just draw out a couple of key points from me. On page 38, under the internal audit update, so a few things that I wanted to highlight was, in terms of internal audit reviews that we've completed, we completed a review of the Financial Management Code. It was the first time we've done that audit at the council, and that's because the Financial Management Code is a new requirement for councils to demonstrate compliance and good governance in finance. So it's pleasing to see that we've provided full assurance on that report. We did identify a couple of low-level recommendations, nothing really of huge significance, but it will just help develop things like the medium-term financial strategy going forwards. But overall, very good. The other one that I would want to draw your attention to is legal services. We completed a follow-up review there. The previous audit report was limited assurance and there was an action plan agreed. We're pleased to say that all of those actions have been implemented. So as a consequence, we've been able to improve the assurance rating from limited up to full assurance. So that's positive. And the other one I would just highlight is carbon management data quality. It's a review that we're doing every year now. Environmental audits are very, very important. The summary from this is the 4th year that we've done this and worked with them. And we can see during these audits that basically processes have improved and data quality has improved. So again, it's an improvement. Last year it was reasonable assurance. We've now been able to provide full assurance on that, so that's positive. On page 40, we do provide an overview of audits, work in progress, and what's coming up. I'd probably highlight there, actually, there's one audit we're probably expecting to conclude this week, which is the disabled facility grant process. So that's a positive. And we've got a few other reviews in train. On page 41, there's the regular counter fraud updates. And what I'd highlight there is we took on board the advice from the committee and feedback from the last meeting. And hopefully all the acronyms have been expanded now to explain what they are. So hopefully that's a little bit more useful. Even I get confused by the acronyms sometimes. So, and then on page 45, just under the training development section, where there's sort of two really things to highlight, both really in the fraud environment. The Public Sector Fraud Authority has been launched by central governments. Worth being aware of that. It's to basically help counter fraud work in the public sector. It is predominantly focused at central government, but we would expect good practice to trickle down to local government too. So that was pretty much the key points I wanted to draw out of the report. Happy to take any comments or questions, and I'm sure it's a joint report. Peter and myself will be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Through yourself, I'm looking mainly at page 43 here. One thing that I just wanted to maybe put a personal view across is that obviously we can see on the closure reason, uneconomical to investigate. I'm perhaps a bit stern on this, Chair, in that if people have defrauded the taxpayer, I think there is an obligation on our part to do it. That may sometimes, we have to be prepared to say that costs us, but there is a principle to the matter. And also we will never know what impact a deterrent has if we are seen to be enforcing. So if anybody's looking at this report and thinking about it, if we can give our full commitment that we will pursue people if they have defrauded the taxpayer. In relation to the live investigations, I mean, that is a considerable amount, and I think we can all foresee that in the current climate it's probably going to increase. So I'm just going to ask around our resources and how we're dealing and coping with the volume at present, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Maddock.
Yeah, thank you. So the report is at the position at the 30th of June, and we had seen quite an increase in the number of live cases, and we're still seeing more live cases come in. The committee were happy to support getting a temporary investigator in to try and clear some of the backlog. Now that person's been with us since probably early June, and we have seen some good progress on the backlog. I've certainly seen quite a few cases come through for closure in recent weeks, but as quickly as we're closing them, we're seeing them come back. We're seeing additional cases coming in. So I think that is the situation. We are seeing more referrals, and every referral we get, we have to at least do a cursory look at it, even if it appears to be a scurrilous referral, which we do get from time to time. So yeah, there was a lot of work in the team, and whilst the temporary investigator has made some good progress, there's a concern that the increase we're seeing will actually be a bit more ongoing.
Thank you, Chair. With that in mind and the comments that have been made, as has been said before, we've supported a temporary. Can I suggest that we express our support for a permanent member of staff as opposed to temporary, and have a review, and if more resources are needed for that department, then they should be allocated. That would be my thoughts, Chair.
Thank you. Actually, myself, I was more concerned by the A10 fraud proven, but no further action. One case, but That definitely seems a little worrying if there was fraud, but we've taken no further action.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the detail behind that case.
Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I raised some last time, and I wondered if you'd made any progress on establishing what the carbon emissions associated with IT systems might be, especially since we went into a shared system with other local authorities.
Thanks. I think that one's for me. I don't have a final conclusion on that yet, but we did take that away and we have started to look into that aspect of it. Yes, we noted that from the last committee. Happy to provide a further feedback on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, I also had a question around carbon management, but it was a kind of general question. I could hang my comments on the carbon management. I wondered, Mr. Tully, where does the measurement standard come from? Are there norms that we need to follow? And in choosing the norms and the measurement techniques and the data handling and so on, are there choices to be made as to how rigorous, how robust? Because I guess this is an area of, where standards are emerging all the time and being adapted. What's the rationale for the choice, and how do you look for triggers, which might perhaps change policy slightly to make it more accurate or more robust?
Sure. So the initial standards, probably rolling back, maybe I want to say maybe about 10 to 15 years ago, were published in the public sector when there were best performance value indicators about things to measure. And that sort of formed a sort of like baseline. So, public sector councils did have a bit of an idea to start with. But it was voluntary over recent years when we started our process. So a lot of our data quality assurance was really around challenging the data, looking at how it's being collected, making sure it was accurate, questioning where assumptions had to be made and whether it's possible to get live real-time data. And that was quite probing and challenging because it's very, very complex to calculate carbon emissions. And that, I think, internally, we improved our own developed process for recording that data. But what we're starting to see now, you're absolutely right, it's becoming more of a standard, and we're starting to see the Local Government Association through central government functions provide more standards around what to expect in carbon management. So we've sort of like committed to follow those as well. So yes, standards are sort of there and they're continually emerging and developing.
Okay, just a brief follow-up question to that. So sometimes these, the quality of data is dependent upon the quality of the assumptions that are made. Do you keep a log of assumptions that you might then update as, as perhaps new circumstances emerge, or you just have a fresh insight into a process that's being monitored?
Well, we wouldn't keep that log of the assumptions. That would be sort of like data held by the team themselves. But when we're talking about assumptions, with perhaps meter readings, that's a really simple example we can all grapple with. A lot of us are used to having smart meters now, rather than working off estimates. But there were still, sort of like during the beginning of this process, perhaps meters which are still working on estimates. So data probably wasn't 100% accurate until the final sort of bills come in. So you're taking measurements at a point in time, but we are seeing more moving to smart data and recording energy. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Jonathan. As the years roll by, year after year after year, I'm gradually noticing that the old eyes that I have to augment with glasses are gradually failing me. And I'm looking at some of these charts, the black and blue ones, which are purgatory, frankly, to look at. And I'm also getting neckache having to turn my head to have a look at them on my computer. So I just wonder whether or not someone in the graphics department might be able to do something different with them so that they could be more easily read. The data can all be spread out horizontally if you like, but it just makes it a bit more user-friendly. And I won't have to complain about my eyes and my stiff neck. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. No, absolutely. When we started doing this this sort of report, it was at the request of the committee, and it's to help keep you informed, and we welcome feedback at every stage and opportunity. Yeah, I can take that away personally and have a look at that. No worries.
Thank you. We don't want Councillor Hales complaining, so please take what action you can.
My eyes are weak, my bones are old.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. And yes, apologies for returning to the same theme, but quite often overlooked in carbon accounting is the sort of embedded carbon. And so I wondered if you could sort of explain what we do around that. I mean, for example, an obvious example would be the work that we've done in the car park, which is a very good story to tell there in terms of ongoing carbon savings, but you know, we're accounting for the embedded carbon cost of that, and if not, perhaps we should, going forward, look at that as well as the ongoing savings.
Okay, I'd have to take that question away if it's okay with you, Councillor, and seek clarification on that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members on the update? I see no hands. In which case I will thank Jonathan Tully for his report, which the committee is asked to note, and I think we have duly noted it. At this point, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is matters of topical interest, report on auditor fees, which I think, Peter Maddock, you're going to present.
Thank you. Following the last meeting of this committee, I had a meeting with EY around the fees. They had provided me with a bit more detail on the makeup of it. Sorry, this is 18-19 fees. So they provided me with a bit more detailed breakdown of those fees. And there were a couple of areas that I think needed looking at, those in relation to the overruns and those in relation to the asset register. So following my meeting with them, I also met with the public sector audit appointments, and they're the body that hold the contracts with local authority auditors. So whilst the auditor works on our accounts, their contract is with the public sector audit appointments. So there's like a three-way sort of arrangement. And one of the reasons for that is that the public sector audit appointments authority, part of their remit is to look at audit fees, review them where there's any issues, and quite clearly the fee issue that we have needs to be reviewed by them, and that's the process that they're carrying out as we speak. So they will be looking through some information that EY have provided. The council have also provided some information, and when I spoke to them, they were of the view that the review would probably take a couple of months, so we should have the outcome of that for the next meeting. The review itself is binding on both us and EY. So I'm hopeful that out of that process we will get a settlement that's fair and reasonable. I think pretty much all audit fee overruns are dealt with by them, and they will give a ruling. So that's where we are with that at the moment, and say we should get a response hopefully within the next sort of month and a half. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And through yourself, I think this, if I recall, this committee supported going to the PSAA, so I'm pleased to see that's happening. And if we could be, when an update is found, if we could be updated and it circulated to all members of the committee. I'm just going to look at the supplement to the supplement, obviously some wording. We can see the track changes, which suggests that there wasn't agreement between EY and this council. So I'm just wondering who was the party that didn't agree, as we now have it felt. So I'm assuming, did both sides feel but they didn't agree? It just seems a very, very odd thing that somebody has gone to the trouble to want to alter this report on something so minor. So I think it would help us if we could understood what side wasn't in agreement, because I hope the council was in full agreement to go to the PSAA. That's what I'm verifying. Yeah, I mean, the subsequent words is just bizarre to have something like that come through. So who's not happy in this arrangement, I think, is my question. And I do have another separate matter of topical interest, but happy to deal with them in turn if you so wish, Chair.
So I don't think it wasn't that either side was unhappy. I mean, following the meeting with EY, we were both in agreement that the PSAA needed to look at it. I think the wording in the original report didn't make it clear that it was a matter of course that the PSAA would actually review the fees. I think the way it was written suggested that they would only look at it if we asked them to. And I think the wording was just trying to make it clear that, you know, because of the level of the fee, you know, they were duty bound to review it. And both us and EY were happy for them to do that. But I say, from our meeting, obviously, we're not happy with the fees, you know, that they're proposing. So the only reasonable course of action is to get the PSAA to review it and come back with their view on it.
Thank you, Chair. So it appears there is agreement, but we can't use the word agreed. On my other topic of interest, or matter of topic of interest, it's toolkit. I did say I might not answer it, but I have seen it now, and the proposal, and I think it would be very, very useful. And I've got Councillor Mark Howlett here, and he'll know that toolkit has been said in every meeting since 2018. Please, if only to just shut me up, can we please do the toolkit so we can do our bit to show that we are taking seriously our responsibilities, and like all professional jobs, we are well trained. Thank you, Chair.
That does seem a very reasonable request.
I think that's fine. Yeah, I'd certainly be interested in a bit more feedback on what you found from the toolkit. But yeah, I think that seems reasonable. Right.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments or questions for Mr. Maddock? No. Moving on to any additional matters, I think we've talked about Treasury management training for members. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, so my colleague is in the process of arranging this with our Treasury Advisors link. We're thinking probably November would be the time. Whether we tie it in with the same day as this committee or do a separate day, I'd be interested in members' thoughts really on that. I think the preference would be to do an in-person training session. And again, I don't know whether... I think that's their preference as well, so some fairly complex issues, and I think it would probably work better in person if members are happy with that. But we're looking at some point in November, we think would be best.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd certainly prefer in-person training, and if you could give us some alternative dates, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additional matters they wish to raise today? Councillor Harvey.
Well, I suppose this probably does come under the purview of this committee, but I was just intrigued by Councillor Williams' discovery that there were sort of track changes. So that really shouldn't happen, I guess, should it? Because anything that goes into the public domain should be turned into a PDF first, because we're really allowing possibly information to kind of be visible, which...
Did you get the second supplement?
No, I didn't. Okay, so is that...
Yeah, it's a supplement to the supplement.
Oh, okay, yeah. So was that was intended to be published rather than...
I think it has been published, isn't it?
I'm just sort of querying whether... Does one have to turn track changes on to see that, or is that highlighted? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. In that case, I think my point is not a valid one. But my sort of worry was that this had been a Word document in which there was hidden information which shouldn't be seen, but that was not the case. So, okay, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Mr Maddock, please, about progress with the current audit that's been undertaken. Thank you.
So the 2019-20 audit recommenced this week. We have asked the auditors to concentrate their resources on the asset register. That's the key piece of work, the most complex piece of work of the audit, and they've confirmed that they have a colleague looking at that. I haven't got anything specific other than that they've started work again. We have had some queries back from them which we're responding to. So it seems to be going ahead as expected. The intention is that the audit gets completed by the end of October or possibly early November. We haven't got a hard and fast date on that because it depends what, if anything, comes out of the audit. But hopefully, you know, it seems to be progressing at the moment, so that's good.
Thank you very much for that update and your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have any matters they wish to raise? Okay, I see no hands. In which case I will note the date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 1st of December at 10 AM, and I will move to close today's meeting. Thank you all for your contribution.